So we're a couple minutes past the hour, so I will go ahead and introduce myself, and then we will get started. So for those who are already on or who just joined us, I'm Dr. Aden, Brandon Aden. I'm the director for the Pilot Grants and Training Core here at CHERISH. I'm at Cornell University. I'm an addiction medicine physician as well. So these are, I will give a more formal introduction as well, but this is Kit Delgado, Dr. Kit Delgado, and Dr. Angie Meinhofer. They are working here at Cornell. They are Angie works at Cornell, Kit is at Penn. They are both pilot grantees, so they will be talking to you today as well. So for the first 15 or first half of the presentation, I will be discussing sort of CHERISH and the pilot grant program, and then we'll have an introduction to our former pilot grantees, and then we'll have a Q&A sort of for the second half. So if you guys have questions as we go along during the presentation, feel free to enter them into the chat, and we'll get to them in the second half as well. So for those of you who aren't familiar with CHERISH, CHERISH is a multi-center, NIDA funded center of excellence. It's a multiple institutions. It's Weill Cornell, Boston Medical University, Boston University School of Public Health, Penn, LDI, and University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. CHERISH is the Center for Health Economics of Treatment Interventions for Substance Use Disorders, HCV and HIV. So our focus is primarily on disseminating health economic research on health utilization, health outcomes, and health-related behaviors that inform treatment related to substance use disorder, HCV, and HIV, and the intersects between those disorders. So CHERISH has multiple services. So today we're going to be talking primarily about our pilot grants, but we also do offer some other services. One of those is our training programs. So we do offer some didactic formal training sessions on health economics and health utilization, et cetera. Some of those are hosted on our website. So if you haven't already been to our website, you can see some previously recorded trainings. We also will post on our website as trainings occur over the year, additional trainings that we are offering. Some of those are in conjunction with other conferences. Some of them we host ourselves, either online or at other institutions. Another services we offer are Childish Research Affiliates Group. So as you sort of work in this field, if you're interested, we have a research affiliates network. So the network of people who work in this area, substance use, HCV, HIV, and those intersections with healthcare, utilization, health economics. It's sort of a nice network, so you can meet with other people who collaborate with them. They also have monthly sort of, or every other month, meetings where they all sort of get together, and we have presentations from experts in the field as well. So it's sort of a nice networking. In addition, we have other additional resources. Some of those are databases that can be used for research in this field. Some of those are our methodology core as well. And through our methodology core, you have access to, you can do consultations with other experts in the field. So if you're working on pilot grants, yourselves, or if you're thinking about adding economic evaluations to research that you're already doing or have questions in that area, we could potentially link you up to people who are experts in the area and assist you with developing those aims or developing your research as you do those, as you progress in that area. All right, so as I said, today we're going to be talking primarily about our pilot grants program. So CHERISH has been around about 7 years now, so this will be our eighth cycle of pilot grants. Pilot grants can be up to $20,000 in funds. This year we will be funding approximately 5 pilot grants, so we have about $100,000 this year for funding, and it is for researchers in the area of health economics research in those in substance use, HCV, and HIV. And so far, it's been a sort of very rewarding program for us, both to meet new people and introduce them to the CHERISH Center as well. So next, we're going to talk about eligibility for applying for the pilot grants. So typically, most of our pilot grantees come from one of 3 buckets. The primary bucket and sort of the group that we're targeting are postdoctoral fellows or trainees. These are typically people who work under the mentorship of one of our CHERISH investigators or from one of our CHERISH research affiliates, working with one of them. That being said, if you are a postdoctoral fellow or a trainee, but you're not working with one of our CHERISH investigators or CHERISH research affiliates, we can connect you with one of them. The next bucket are people who are investigators nominated by CHERISH investigator or research affiliates. So you may be a little bit further along in your career. In this group, primarily, we're looking at people who are sort of new to the field. So have historically either done economic evaluation research, but not in the field of substance use, HIV, or Hep C, or maybe have done HCV, HIV, or substance use research in the past, but haven't done any economic sort of evaluation, but are sort of branching out into that area. And that's sort of the group of people we're targeting as well. And then finally, the last group are our CHERISH investigators and CHERISH research affiliates as well. As I said, if you feel like you don't belong in any of these buckets, feel free to reach out to us. Either we can connect you to a research investigator, CHERISH research affiliate to sort of be your connection to the field, but we can figure that out so you can apply for the grant. So please feel free to apply if you're interested. All right, so the application timeline and overview. So the LOIs, or letters of intent, are due towards the end of January, on January 28th. The intent of the LOI is one, just for us to get an idea of who's interested in applying, and also so we can sort of start arranging for reviewers for potential applicants. If you submit an LOI, it doesn't mean you're definitely submitting an application. So if you are thinking about it, but you're not positive, go ahead and fill the LOI out, just so we are tracking that. And then the actual final proposals will be due at the end of February. February 25th is the deadline for that. And then we will review those proposals over the next 1 or 2 months after that, with plans for notice of awards at the beginning of May. So you'll receive that notice at the beginning of May, and then distribution of funds shortly thereafter. For the letter of intent, we'll have a template on the application site, but the letter of intent, what we ask for is what institution you're with, sort of where you are in your career, so early investigator, instructor, that sort of thing, and then some basic demographics, and then a very short summary of what your project proposal is, and then the other thing is how you feel like the project will fit with CHERISH missions, also the NIH economic and HIV research priorities. And this is largely just to make sure you fit the eligibility criteria. If you don't, if we can sort of assist you in doing that, but it also helps us determine who would be potential reviewers for your application when you submit your application. That being said, if you submit your LOI and you decide not to apply, that's fine. You're not required to apply just by submitting an LOI. It's not a contractual obligation or anything for us. So please feel free to submit an LOI, even if you think ultimately you may not apply, because potentially we can sort of help you develop a project that you might be interested in, but you think may not be ready for application. For the application itself, it follows pretty much normal NIH sort of application process. So there will be the research plan, which is the largest chunk of your application. So this is your research strategy with your aims, and then references, human subject timeline, and dissemination plan for it. And then there'll be a budget and budget support section, the bio sketch. The only thing that'll be a little bit different than a normal NIH application is we asked some questions about how this pilot grant will be useful to you in your career, how you think it'll be useful, either applying for subsequent grants, et cetera, what you intend to do with it, how it fits with the CHERISH mission and the NIH priorities as well. And then for this cycle, we do also have some special topics of interest that we are interested in. So justice legal involvement, polysubstance use or non-opioid substance use, and then PrEP for HIV prevention. That being said, your pilot grant does not have to address one of these topics. These are just topics that we were interested in this time for various reasons. Some of that is a lot of focus in the area of substance use research has been primarily on opioids, but if you're sort of in the field, you know, a lot of other substances are epidemiology. There's increasing use of stimulants in particular, and also changes in legal status in marijuana. So we were sort of interested in getting more research in those fields as well. So that's sort of the broad overview of the actual application process. Oh, I don't have the new slide. Sorry, Jared. I think you added a couple other.
No, that should be good. I think at this point, we were just going to open it up for questions from folks about the application process or anything along those lines.
I had a quick question about the implementation of the grant. Like, so the decisions are by like May 1st, right? So when does the cycle start?
So the notice of award is by May 1st, and usually the money is dispensed, usually hopefully by June 1st. There is a process. So because we're an NIH-funded center, we give the notice of award to you by May 1st with, we still have to get approval from NIH as well, from our PO. So once you get the notice of award, then we ask you to submit an IRB. And once the IRB approved, the funding is released. So depending on how long that takes, that may be the process, but generally within a month or two, the funding is released.
That should be the timeline on when we put in the application, right? Just assume June 1st as a start.
You could assume it's May 1st just for that process, but the money is often carried over, so that's not necessarily an issue if you extend your grant. So in reality, most people don't finish their grant within that first year, and so often we allow them to carry over funding if needed.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And to add on the grant mechanic side, even though the contract might not be executed until June 1st, meaning that you won't have it in hand until then, you can allocate any expenses from May 1st onward that are related to the grant that you specify in the application.
Yes, correct.
Hi, thank you for the short presentation. I was curious, with these pilot studies, are we allowed to kind of like extend on a current study to doing like adding an additional aspect to it?
Yes. So we've had pilot grantees who've done that before. So if you already have a large like P1 large grant that you're already working on and you want to do some additional analysis or sub-analysis, that is fine. You can use this pilot grant to do that, as long as that sub-analysis is unique or different than the large grant that you're sort of building this upon. Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Great, thank you.
Great. And Bonnie, if you can put a link to the CHERISH research affiliates in the chat, I think that would be a great way to let folks know about who fills that criterion.
Yeah, there are a couple other things that I just wanted to mention for the pilot grants as well. Just as I said, so the pilot grant is roughly for a year-long process. As part of the pilot grant, and Kit and Angie can talk about this a little bit more, there are a couple things that go along with it. As part of the pilot grant, you will have quarterly check-ins with me, and you will also meet with the center director, who's Dr. Bruce Shackman as well. Those are largely geared towards one, seeing how you're doing with the pilot grant and sort of tracking progress along that, but also opportunities to sort of help you if you need guidance or thinking about your career. As I said, we sort of focus primarily on junior investigators or early investigators. So part of the idea of the pilot grant is to offer you support as you think about potentially if you're doing job searches, if you're thinking about where next steps. So if you're a postdoc, thinking about where you want to go institution-wise, if you're thinking about applying for K grants, that sort of stuff. So we do also offer that support as part of the pilot grant as well, which is particularly useful for people who are more junior. If you're more advanced in your career, that's probably not as useful. But there are some additional sort of services we have. And then, as I mentioned, other services that the center itself offers, our methodology core, sort of our list of research affiliates. If you need some additional expertise, we can sort of link you with those people as you work on your pilot grant as well, sort of give you additional support as you think about or work on your pilot grant as well.
Could you expand upon like the definition of a junior researcher? So I know you just kind of mentioned like postdocs, but let's say I'm like, for instance, I'm not a postdoc. I don't have a PhD. I have 2 master's degrees and like 6 years of research experience, but I just haven't been a PI of my own research study. Would that fit the mold of junior research? Yeah,
so it's not necessarily, you don't have to be a postdoc. I mean, you can be instructor level, assistant professor level, sort of, but it's people who are early in their career. You generally, that's, less than 6 years roughly, or into their research career, maybe up to 10 after the end of their last degree, sort of in a definition. That being said, it's sort of a little bit case by case basis, sort of what your interests are. So as I mentioned, one of the things we also do focus on are people who may be a little more advanced in their career, but are deciding to shift focus. So people who may previously did substance use, but never really thought about health economics and now are interested in adding that to their research portfolio would be a group that we'd be interested in as well. or vice versa, people who've done research in the area of health economics in some way, but have never looked at substance use, HCV or HIV, but are now interested in those topics. Those are people we'd be interested in as well. So the idea is sort of bringing people into this field, whether they're literally starting out their careers or maybe they're in their careers but changing focus.
All right, thank you.
Sure. All right. So for the next part, I just wanted to introduce a couple of former pilot grantees and they can discuss sort of their experience with the pilot grants. We have two pilot grantees who are joining us today. Dr. Delgado, he is an assistant professor of emergency medicine and epidemiology and attending physician at Penn University and Penn Presbyterian Medical Center. He's also the associate director for the Center for Health Incentives and Behavioral Economics and the deputy director of the Penn Medicine Nudge Unit. His pilot grant was working primarily using large claims database to look at variability in opioid drug prescribing practices for providers with 6 specialties. And our other prior grant awardee is Dr. Angélica Meinhofer, who works here at Cornell. She's assistant professor at the Department of Population Health Sciences here at Weill Cornell, specializing in health economics and applied microeconomics. Her pilot grant was looking primarily at state policies that were specifically focused on addressing substance use during pregnancy and those the outcomes associated with those various policies, maternal behavior, pregnancy outcomes, and costs. She also using a national database. So I will let Kit and Angie sort of introduce themselves a little bit more if they want and sort of discuss their experience. And then if we have questions, we'll ask them as well. And I believe, I don't know who wants to go first, or do you care? Okay, I'm gonna go with Kit since you're at the top of my screen.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Kit Delgado. I practice emergency medicine, but I'm primarily a health services researcher. My pilot grant was submitted, actually, it's crazy, it's 6 years ago, I think, 2015. So it was a very different phase in the, I think when people were a lot more concerned about opioid prescribing than they are now. And it was a $20,000 pilot grant. I just started, I think I was transitioning from my postdoc research fellowship onto my first year in faculty, and did not yet have my K award. So this was really one of my first, kind of really got me off the ground on one of my first research projects. We published a couple of papers based on the work from this grant, really showing pretty wide variability in how opioids are prescribed for ankle sprains, and then for relatively simple surgeries, and high variability from state to state. And we used the funds for, I used it primarily because I didn't have any statistical analyst support, and to do claims analysis, that basically all the funds went to go to support an analyst to pull together insurance claims and put it into an analytic data set and run the data. So it was very helpful. And eventually that work led to more work, which led to other sources of funding. And so I'm very grateful for the pilot grant funds. And I don't do nearly as much work in opioid prescribing, mostly on opioid use disorder in the ER right now in treatment, but it was very helpful to get up and running.
AMG, do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience?
Of course. Thank you so much for inviting me to, to talk with all of you guys about what was a wonderful experience for me to be able to receive a pilot grant fund. So maybe I was awarded in 2018 or 19, I can't remember, but before I tell you all of that, let me tell you real quick. I am a trained economist. I did my PhD at Brown. Then I came here to Weill Cornell as an instructor in 2018. And I was on a T32 and at the same time working towards a K award. And my research is related to substance use disorders and policies. And then let me tell you now how that K award, sorry, not that K award, the pilot grant was such a important source of support for me. And I used it very strategically and very wisely, in my opinion. And it helped me, I believe, accomplish a lot of, it was a very critical stepping stone. And so as Brandon said, my K award, I'm so sorry, my pilot grant was about the impact of prenatal substance use policies on maternal and infant health outcomes. But more than that, it was a stepping stone. And the way that I designed my proposal was, thinking a couple of steps ahead. And I think if you are able to do that, I would strongly recommend it. And how did I think a couple of steps ahead? I knew that I wanted a K award, and I knew the area that my K award was going to be. And I knew that the second I entered work at Weill Cornell, I knew what my K award was going to be, but I did not have any publications in the area my K award was going to be about. And I needed to, have, one or two related papers around it. So this pilot grant allowed me to, number one, buy fertile data. And what do I mean by fertile data? Data that allowed me to write a ton of papers, not just, I didn't use these grants on things that could only be spent. I didn't use the funds on things that could only be spent for the proposed study, but I got data that has allowed me to generate so many papers. And that put me in a very good position at the time that I was going to apply for my K award. Not only that, but I was able to use the idea from the pilot grant and extend it and apply to Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funding. And so I was able to obtain, not only, I was able to obtain that for additional work that started with my pilot grant funds. And then not only that, but then I was able to generate a series of papers that were, related to the topic of my CHERISH pilot funds, but that were also related to more generally the area that my K award, I wanted it to be about. And so at the time that I submitted my K award, I already had an entire infrastructure that started with $20,000 from a CHERISH pilot grant. And the reason I was able to do this is because I just knew the goal, which was a K award. And I knew what I needed to get there, and that these funds were essential in me, kind of connecting from point A to point B. And so, yeah, I super encourage you to apply.
Great. Thank you both for sort of giving us your feedback. And I know something else that I think Angie has become part of we have a mentorship group now, which is a little bit different. So sort of subsequent to the pilot grant, we do also here at CHERISH have a mentorship group that some of our prior pilot grantees have joined. And it allows them sort of work with other people who are sort of new investigators, junior in the field as well. And so that's sort of another sort of service that's usually after the pilot grant, but sort of help people develop their careers. But I think Kit is an MD by training, Angie is a PhD by training. We definitely have a mix of those two when people apply for pilot grants. So depending on your background, that's fine. You don't have to be an economist, or you don't have to be a clinician who works in addiction, that sort of field. So it's pretty broad. People we have apply, as both of them sort of have different backgrounds as well. I think Angie sort of has a very strategic way of using her pilot grant. That isn't necessarily what happens for every pilot grantee. As we mentioned, some people use this to develop additional research for other grants that they're already working on. So if you have some additional aims you want to do and sort of expand that research as well. But there are sort of various ways to use their pilot grant. But overall, the goal is to sort of enhance research, but also to help you enhance your career as well. With that being said, I'm going to open it up to questions about the pilot grant itself, about the program. If you have questions about CHERISH, we can answer as well, or if you have questions for either Kit or Angie as well.
I had a question about kind of scope and type of study. It sounds like, Angélica, that your study was it on like archival administrative data sets? Yes.
So in my particular study, I used my pilot grant funds for two things. One, to buy HCUP data. So I bought, this is administrative hospital discharge data. that is available through AHRQ, and it basically captures a universe of hospitalizations in the United States. And so this data I was able to use not only for the purpose of my aims of my pilot grant, but it's just incredible data that, you know, you can repurpose for a lot of, you know, for a lot of other research questions. And it has been very helpful to have for, you know, the purpose of this grant and also for other future grant applications.
Thank you.
I was going to answer a couple of other questions I see that people have put in the chats. So I think Bonnie just posted a link to our research affiliate. So if you're not already connected with somebody at Cornell, either one of our, or at CHERISH, one of our research affiliates or primary researchers, she did post the link so you can sort of see who everybody is. That being said, feel free to reach out to us at any point and we can sort of, depending on what your interests are, try to link you up with somebody who's a research affiliate that you can sort of work with as your sponsor for the pilot grant. The other question I see from Dion Cooper, Alan, yes, so as a PhD candidate, that's fine, you're eligible to apply. We've had PhD candidates who apply for pilot grants previously and have obtained pilot grants. As long as the pilot grant sort of fits in the field, that is fine. So you don't, you can still be in PhD, getting your PhD or in school, that's fine as well. Yeah, so I see another question in the chat. Yeah, so the pilot grant, the money can be used however you see fit, basically. So it can be used to buy data, as Angie did. It can be used for salary support, whether that is support for somebody who's going to do the data analysis for you, like Kit did, buying time for a data analysis, but can also be used for salary support for the PI or for anybody else who's sort of working on the project. It is a relatively small amount, $20,000. So you just have to think about how you spend that money strategically and make sure you use it wisely, because it isn't, obviously isn't a ton of money. If you're doing salary support for somebody whose salary is very high, yeah, it can get eaten up very fast. So just something to sort of think about as you think about the funding. But you can use the funding for, you know, if you want to attend conferences, doing dissemination, that stuff is fine as well. So it's pretty broad how you spend the money. While we're asking for more questions, I'm just going to throw this question out for Kit and Angie. Sort of, in addition to your experience with the pilot grants, if you can give an overview of sort of, or some insight of what your experience with CHERISH as a center has been like, and sort of what your what that experience has been like and how useful that's been or not useful that's been as you've developed your careers as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's, yeah, I think for someone who's starting out getting into substance use research, it provided a great network of other investigators to learn from. Also through social media and disseminating of other people's work and our own work has been really helpful. I think I even participated in something on like how to use Twitter in CHERISH, which, you know, I wasn't a big believer a while ago, but I've sort of taken it on as a way to network with you know, people across the country who are doing this work and or sharing their experiences, and so I think the network has been really helpful, and it was offered some opportunities also to, you know, for collaboration, also to do some further health economic analyses of the work that we've been doing. So it's been very positive.
Exactly the same thoughts as Kit. It's been incredibly helpful, you know, not only because of the pilot grant funds, but just more generally with research dissemination of your work. I have participated, probably in the very same Twitter workshop that Kit described, and also, you know, I have met with other folks to help me think about how to write pieces for maybe newspapers or blogs and things of the sort. Also, just more generally, you know, there's been a time that I needed to be connected with a certain person, because you know, let's say that I was applying for a grant and there was a certain expertise that I was lacking, or that at Weill Cornell wasn't available, then I have benefited from mentorship through CHERISH and connections to other researchers that perhaps had the skill set that I needed, but that I didn't have. So yeah. many, many ways, many benefits.
Yeah, as both Angie and Kit mentioned, one of the centers or institutions as part of the CHERISH network is the LDI, the Leonard David Institute at Penn, which focuses a large amount on dissemination of research. So as part of the pilot grant, yeah, you will meet with leadership at LDI, and they give you some training about how to get your research out there and how to communicate it effectively to the people you want to communicate it to. So that includes going through traditional media such as newspapers, news, but also focus on social media. And CHERISH and LDI both will also sort of assist in trying to get your information out there. So with blog posts, also doing tweeting, that sort of stuff to disseminate your research as well. Just to answer a couple of questions I see in the chat. So $20,000, yes, that is it's direct cost. So if you apply for the pilot grantee, we generally for this grant don't do indirect costs. So we usually ask the institutions that you're at or affiliated with to waive the indirect cost just because it's pilot grant. And so that we don't spend the large chunk of your money on indirect costs. And we haven't had any issues with that in the past because of the size of the grant itself. Most institutions are willing to waive the indirect cost. Yes, so for NIH priorities for health economics, the definition is pretty broad. So health utilization is useful as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean traditional health economics that people think about necessarily. So it doesn't have to be cost effectiveness, cost utility, that sort of analysis specifically. So it is fairly broad. Yeah, so health service utilization definitely sort of falls within that realm.
Thanks, Brandon. And I'll just follow up on that. Would the other two examples satisfy that criterion? So like maybe not looking at healthcare utilization, but looking at the role of socioeconomic status in a substance use related outcome, and like maybe like emerging econometric techniques as a method, just trying to understand kind of the breadth.
Yeah, so econometric techniques would probably fit the criteria. If you were just looking at SES and then their sort of outcomes, that probably would not fit within the criteria. If you were looking at SES and their use, healthcare utilization in some way, so if there was sort of impact on healthcare utilization based on SES, so people who had the same health disorder. So if there are substance use, people with a history of like opioid use disorder traditionally, but of different SES and what their healthcare utilization was, if that impacted it, then that would probably fit the requirements, but just SES alone wouldn't. So it'd have to be how that impacts healthcare utilization in some way.
Got it. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, as you're thinking, and this is sort of true of everybody, as you're thinking, part of the point of the LOI, the letter of intent, is for us to sort of, if your thoughts don't quite fit the requirements, then we can sort of help you through that process to make sure that by the time you submit your pilot grant, that you are fitting within our sort of range of what we expect or what is required. So that's part of the LOI process as well. So if you have an idea, you can feel free to send us the ideas earlier than that, but if you have an idea and you're not sure, we're all happy to sort of discuss that with you in one-on-one process as well. You're gonna chime in, Jared? I see you.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to add that, to be honest, if it's not clear to us whether it fits the definition or not, our approach is we actually reach out to our project officer who, supports us through CHERISH, and, we ask her guidance and her advice and say, how does this look to you? And so, I just wanted to share that one of the things that we try to do through this LOI process to make sure that the proposed project conforms to NIH priorities. And sometimes that involves, our project officer directly.
So unless there are other questions, I'm not going to keep everybody here for another 20 minutes. I'll let you go early. The session is being recorded. So if you, I think we're going to send the recording out to you, but feel free to reach out to us at any point if you have any questions. Feel free to email any of us as you're thinking about this. So you don't have to wait for your LOI if you have questions before that, if you're thinking of a topic and you're not sure, or if you don't have a research affiliate or somebody who's sort of sponsoring you, working with you, and you need us to help you make that connection, please feel free to reach out to us and we can make that connection for you. And as we work through this process, it's not sort of the traditional NIH pathway where they send an RFA, you create your application, you submit it, and there's no sort of communication. This is a very sort of open process. So if you have questions as we go through that, we'll sort of communicate back and forth. even after people submit their pilot grants, occasionally we say, oh, you need to make some tweaks or changes. So if the pilot grant is sort of something we look like we want to fund, but doesn't quite fit exactly what we need, sometimes we have people make slight changes to their pilot grants even after their submission. So it is somewhat an iterative process sometimes. So. All right, so I will leave it that on the pilot grants. Also, just if you haven't looked at our website, please feel free to look at the website. We have some other trainings that are available on there. And as I said, we will post other trainings as we offer them in the future. We also have our methodology consult service that isn't specific to the pilot grants. So if you thinking more broadly as you're doing your research, if there are things you're interested in, but need some help with that, feel free to reach out to our methodology core, and they can sort of connect you with people who can help assist you with that as well, and potentially connect you to people you might collaborate with in the future. Jared, do you have any additional comments before we end here?
Nope, just if you get a chance to take a look at that survey evaluation link, please do. And Bonnie and I will follow up with a copy of the slides, as well as the survey link. And then about a week after that, we'll follow up with a link to the recording. And we'll be in touch. And as Dr. Aden mentioned, please reach out. We're here to answer questions, and we're excited about the interest. So thank you so much for joining and attending today.